Hey guys, Apotheosis here, welcome back. So this progression path video is a way bigger project than I anticipated. I actually have to divide it up into two parts for you guys, but we're going to cover months of progression all in this series. The good thing is that all this information is compiled in one spot for you to reference easily on your journey. If you've not been able to beat Trent or Damocles on stage 12, then start here. If you have beat either of those bosses, then you can definitely move on to part 2. But to begin this path, we will start off with getting all of the stage 10 battles on auto. This will allow you to collect recipes and mats to craft level 80 to 85 gear in the lab. This will be the entry level gear used to move into stage 12 battles. Then we have 2 stage 12 battles that are actually really easy to get into. We farm these for a while to get you ready to tackle the challenges that part 2 of this video presents. Check the video description below for a collection of all the resources you will ever need on this journey. If you're still working on getting your way, start with the shopping list to know which Elunes to lock in on the way to the mid game. This list is built to include Elunes that are very efficient at completing this content. You can do this content without them, but it really streamlines the progression if you follow my path. It also helps to follow the yellow arrows very closely. This is why the game has struggled to retain an audience for so long. This path is not clear at all in game. People get stuck before ever seeing boss battles in action. The path works very well, but it's so disjointed. Trust me and follow this to save yourself a lot of time and a lot of headaches. Read the key in the bottom right of the graphic to understand it a little bit better. I will have this whole thing linked in the description below. Together with that graphic, I've gathered a lot of resources all into one place for you. I will probably end up skipping a lot of boss mechanics. We just don't have time to review each boss in that much detail. If you try my teams and you still get stuck, check that you aren't missing a mechanic by learning about the fight a little bit more in the super thread on Reddit. Mantis's tier list is also a great resource with a lot of great information on the extra sheets that you can access from the bottom of the document. And yes, a slated Rita can solo Trent 10. That doesn't work for my guide. Instead, I will demonstrate all stage 10 battles using absolutely bare minimum stuff. Easily attainable, free to play stuff. I will show you the fight with very weak teams on auto. Then you can use it as a base to build your own teams with the Elunes that you did invest your resources into. If these weak, undergeared teams can auto this content, then you can definitely manual it. Start on manual and then improve your team until they can auto. More stats, more gear, more skill ups, and better Elunes just means faster clear times. This entire guide will be built this way. I want to open the door to this content. I strongly encourage you to learn how to explore min-maxing on your own. Explore the options that your account has available. Replace and improve pieces of all of these strategies on your own or with your friends. Thinking this way will then allow you to learn min-maxing and later compete in content that has leaderboards and big rewards for your efforts. There are some mandatory requirements to make this first stage of the progression a little bit easier. 6-star your Chloe Van as soon as possible. She comes as a 5-star, so this is really easy. Then skill up her S2 first and then her S3. Also, you want your Weiwei to be 6-starred at this point. Skill up her S2 and her S3 as soon as possible with any and all legendary books before other Elunes start getting skill ups. You should also use the Iron Wall formation and level it up with gold when you can afford it. With an attacker in the backline spot, this will synergize very well with Weiwei. She earns a soul generation passive when you 6-star her. For the first 4 bosses, you don't really need a healer as the boss should be CC'd the whole time. Fabian is just there for protection on auto in case something starts to fail. You could replace him with more damage if you like. If you do use him, his 3rd passive is unlocked at 6-star, and that really helps him survive a lot. You could also try any other healer that you have invested in on your account. Trent and Freya are excellent investments at this stage of the game in preparation for the next stage. Even 9 months into the game when no one uses her anymore, I really like Reyna for the next spot here, providing you a second crowd control in a separate school of tolerance. You can replace her with another spammable CC like Kangrim's S2. Rita's S2 even works on Trent and Proto. Reyna might not be used as much later on, but she is still very good for this stage of the game. and she's a relatively cheap investment as you can keep her at +0 to get all of this done. If you need to save debuff or seeds, you can even use her at 5-star level 50 with a little bit of gear on. 6-starring Elunes just unlocks that third passive and adds stats. Neither of these will make or break the team in Reyna's case. Lastly, bring Mika or choose a big damage dealer like Arslan or Kangrim. Mikazuki would help your team keep landing CC the longer the fight goes on. Keeping her on S1 makes tolerance stack a lot slower by removing stacks of tolerance with her passive. If you don't have Mika, more damage will help you end the fight before tolerance becomes an issue. Without my Elunes wearing any gear, Mika was my better option here. Skill ups on the rest of my team were not too important. The only important thing for gear sets is to have full moon 3 sets on your Elunes that are doing crowd control. In my case, this is Chloe Van and Reyna. Then you can set up the skill queue if you're using auto to CC for those in this role. So I have Chloe and Reyna both queued to use their S2. I lose a lot of damage because Chloe will not use her S3, but the boss also stayed CC this way. We will quick run through replays of all of these fights on auto. If for some odd reason you need to watch the parts that I fast forward, just change your playback speed and YouTube settings to 25% for those parts. For Trent, the only thing I want to show you is how to check resistance of the boss mid-fight. If you hold down on the target, a little tooltip will pop up at the top with a magnifying glass. Click that and you will see that each boss is vulnerable to different schools of CC. If you're trying to make your own team, keep this in mind. For example, Trent is more vulnerable to physical effects and more resistant to spell effects. Next we have Proto. You can see again the resistance here varies a decent amount. Also keep in mind that these will change as CC lands and tolerance gets applied. Also notice how you can see the boss's defensive stats and speed here. You can view all this from the index in game as well. Speed and defense will be a lot more important for building teams later, but has less impact at this stage of the game. Now these two fights are by far the easiest on auto. It's very easy to keep the boss crowd controlled for the entire fight. Just whittle him down slowly and collect your gear. For Imae stage 10, I did have to replace my Mikazuki with a physical damage dealer. The good news is, we did stay free to play here. My undergeared Mika just didn't do enough damage to kill the left side in time to clear on auto. Who can you use as your physical damage dealer? Really anyone. Normally I would reach for an Arslan, a Reaper, or a Balder, but since they are all slated on my account, I had to grab my Kai and took his gear off to have stats that you can attain really easily. Mika is also a lot less useful on this fight because tolerance resets every time he transitions anyway. The nice thing here is that even on auto, they will usually target the right color of Imae to do damage. If you aren't familiar with what I'm talking about, be very careful in phase 3 and phase 4. Blue Imae should be attacked by physical damage dealers and red Imae by magic damage dealers, because those shields around them will reflect damage of the wrong type. If you need more information on these mechanics, check the index in-game, or read the resources that I have linked in the description below. You will also need to finish the bosses within 2 turns of each other. So when one side dies, you must kill the other side before the dead one takes 2 turns. Another thing to pay attention to here is that red and blue Imae both have different resistances. So pay attention to this if you're changing the team in terms of crowd control. For Iscariot, I highly recommend bringing Gaonsari, even though his use outside of this content is pretty limited. It definitely helps to make one if you do want to repeat this fight on auto. Turn order is also very important when using him. Have Gaonsari attack before your crowd control Elunes. Do this by giving him at least 1 more speed than those allies to change the turn order so that he moves before them. This helps a lot on auto because the boss's base resistances are so high. His amulet is a soul effect that will decrease all resistances by 10. All you need is for him to land and attack with his S1 to apply that amulet. If you're still having trouble surviving that boss's opening cleave attack, start off by manually landing the crowd control on the first turn, and then keep him CC'd for the whole fight. Again, work your way to a team that can auto later on. Also, before you attempt this fight, make sure you aren't wearing any Disciple 3 sets. Any barriers that are active when the boss attacks will make him cleave twice, almost guaranteeing a wipe for early teams. This replay is also a great example of why I like Fabian on these auto teams. I lose 2 Elunes at the very opening because 2 of them missed their CC on the opening turn. I almost quit, but instead I let it run. They were able to pull it off in the end, even without wearing good gear. The last 2 fights will be immune to CC, so we're going to have to cover a couple more boss mechanics here. But you can easily bypass the mechanics anyway with minimal investment. For Ahkenaten, bring people with built-in increases to crit rate in their passives. This will allow you to fill the jar in phase 2 without healing the boss excessively. You can also bring a crit buffer like Karu or Miho to help with this. Again, I can't bring Arslan due to his slate, so Kai is here even though he doesn't have big increases to crit rate like other Elunes do. Arslan, Rita, Chloe, Kunhar, and Sedna are all examples of Elunes that do this. In the first phase, the left jar fills by your team taking damage. At lower stages or higher gear levels, this jar might be very hard to fill. You can turn Weiwei's bubble tea off in phase 1 to decrease your armor, or remove helmets and boots before the fight starts to take more damage throughout the fight. Or you can bypass this mechanic by sacrificing an Elune during the transition into phase 2. The boss will instant kill a target while he's immune to damage and stuck in that phase transition for too long. This happens every time a jar fills up. When that jar takes a turn, it will assign a mark to someone on your team. If the boss attacks while everyone has a mark, he will instantly kill somebody. For phase 1, this will transition the fight for you into phase 2 if you were having trouble taking damage. It is fine to continue the fight without that person, just realize they cannot be rezzed when dying to that mechanic. Phase 2 is when crits matter. Crit damage will fill the jar on the right, and healing done will fill the jar on the left. Fabian and Bubble Tea can definitely fill this left jar on auto. Then phase 3 is a pretty easy burn no matter what your gear level, as long as you're critting, as you can see my team do without any gear. Damocles is actually a very awesome fight with very unique fight mechanics that you will end up bypassing entirely using passive healing. Bubble Tea from Weiwei and passive healing built into Fabian and Freya's kits are my suggestion here. Trent can also spam his S2 if you don't have a Freya. Leskar and his S3 are decent as well if you're out of options. Just realize my Freya is both naked and only 5-star, so anyone can skip these mechanics if they want. Just stack these heals and bring 2 damage dealers. Which damage dealer doesn't matter too much. The boss has very low defensive stats. Again, I can't bring out the good options here for demonstration because of my dimensional slates. But even under geared, my team pulls this off very easily. If you want to, you can use the fight mechanics on manual. Basically, the fire lanterns will give you a buff that prevent and remove the debuffs that freeze you. The lantern on the left can be attacked, and the one on the right can be healed to grant this buff. To prevent getting frozen, grab it while transitioning between phases. You can also prevent the frozen target from dying by unfreezing them during the boss's channeled attack, or res the target after they die. Another option is with enough gear, you can phase him into phase 3 before he even finishes the channel. Again, I skipped the lanterns entirely, even with a weak team. That wraps up the first stage of your progression. Your first kill of a boss battle each day grants increased rewards. Kill each boss at the highest difficulty that you can every day. If drop rates are good enough, you can also auto battle farm stage 10 battles for recipes to craft level 80 gear sets. This will help open the door to stage 12 immensely. This is the mid-game farm that unlocks the late game for you. If recipe drops on stage 10 are buffed or good enough for you, go ahead and farm it up to speed up your progression. To make the transition from the mid-game to the late game, refer again to the progression path graphic that we started the video with. After stage 10, you cannot keep these bosses CC'd anymore. This ends up a huge jump in difficulty, and we have to deal with actual fight mechanics together with increases in stats. Luckily, we have a couple of cheese strats that are available for 2 of the stage 12s that will greatly open the door to this stage of progression quicker. You will probably be surprised how easy Proto or Iscariot 12s might be if you just try with these teams that we have available. For Proto 12, we actually have a couple of cheese strategies available to us. If you manage to collect Mikazuki and Mei, definitely watch my Zombie Mei video that I have linked in the description. It goes into several options even to replace Mika if you've only managed to get Mei so far. If not, definitely get your hands on an alluring Bella. You can summon her with friendship points if you're having trouble summoning her or farming her from Ice Road. Skill up her S2 to max using rare skill books, and put a 3-piece full moon set on her to increase her inflict rate. Just escort her to the golems in the boss's 3rd phase. Use Bubble Tea from Weiwei, bring healers, resistance or immunity, and barriers to escort her successfully. Also, be careful about buffing damage buffs. They will get copied by the boss and make it harder to survive. This even includes Sweet Temptation or crit buffs. If you still can't summon her, you also have a couple of other options. You can look at Reyna's S1 together with high crit rate, but you might want to bring a crit buffer just for this. Just remember about increasing that boss's damage output. You will need to work around this to survive. A last resort would also be to make a normal Elune called a Banshee, which you can farm from scenario or summon her with friendship points. Her S2 is AoE Confuse, but it only has a 50% inflict rate. So it's a lot more RNG than Bella, but it is an option if you want to try it. Then if you are lucky enough to summon an Elena in your early game, which is a mythical Elune with a very low summon rate, her S3 should also function just fine for this role of confusing the golems. I do have videos on this strategy as well if you need examples of the escort to the golems in practice. For Iscariot 12, you want to have a Reaper available. Put her in the back line of that iron wall formation. Then fill your front line with tanks and debuffers. Bringing only those roles in your front line will make sure that Reaper is always the target of one of the attacks that would normally really hurt your team. You want tanks to ensure that your front line survives. I really like Rachel here. Her S2 can help almost any front line survive this boss's low damage output. Other people like Imae and Fahrenheit are options at tank as well. Any debuffer and tank combo frontline should work though. Bringing supports and DPS might help speed up the fight, but just expect that those Elunes will eventually die to the fight's mechanics. After setting this up, put it on auto and see if you can clear it. If you don't have Reaper and want to try Iscariot 12 anyway, I do have an in-depth guide on the fight's full mechanics. Even without Reaper, it's a pretty easy fight, but Trent and Caroline will help a lot if you do go this route. We all use Reaper at this point because it gives us all an auto team really early on. After these cheese strats, requirements for gear and investments into your Elunes really steepens. So you can use these two stage 12s to farm for a while if the next stage of this progression is too hard for where your account is right now. Also realize stage 12s drop uncommon souls that you can use to craft level 85 gears using the same recipes that you were farming from stage 10s. This can help a lot when it comes to recipes from Trent and Ahkenaten. Craft level 85 main hand and offhand weapons as soon as you can. I'm going to end part 1 here because the next section requires so much more investment. I don't want to intimidate new players. There's plenty to digest from this video anyway, so make these your in-game PvE goals and you can transition to the late game in no time. Thanks for tuning in. Mahalo nui loa for the support as always, and I'll see you in part 2. Bye!